Here is a collection of my videos related to ham radio, amateur radio. It includes how to become a ham radio, amateur radio operator in India. Reminiscences of a radio
Here is a
amateur.
collection
of my videos related to ham radio. My initial thoughts on how
radio.
to work amateur radio satellites. Geostationary amateur radio satellite. My thoughts on homebrewing amateur radio HF rig. What is Arduino Nano controller? How to become a ham radio, amateur radio operator in India. Any citizen above the age of 12 years can become a ham by qualifying in the amateur station operator's license restricted examination and obtaining a valid license. Those between 12 to 18 years will have to provide an undertaking by the parent or guardian in the prescribed format. Applicants above the age of 18 years need not provide such undertaking. There are two grades of licenses, restricted and general. Examinations are conducted at any of the wireless monitoring stations or international monitoring stations. The examination has two parts. Part A is Basic Electronics and Part B Radio Regulations. Restricted grade examination is for 1 hour and has 25 questions each, while general grade examinations have 50 questions each and is for 2 hours. In addition to this, general grade candidates have to undertake an examination in transmission and reception of Morse code. A candidate can also write for both restricted and general grade examinations in the same sitting by paying the fees for both together. Upgradation from restricted grade will need passing of the general grade examination at a later date. Application for the examination and later for the license after passing the examination are online through the Saral Sanjar portal to get the amateur wireless telegraph station license or certificate. From a choice of 3 call signs provided by you, a available call sign will be provided. License can be taken for 20 years or lifelong, which is up to 80 years of age. Though there is no need for permission of a temporary change of location of the station as for participation in a ham fest, permanent change of location needs permission from WPC. Application has to be submitted through the Saral Sanjar portal. This is only a brief overview. For more detailed information on ham radio regulations in India, please visit the Saral Sanjar portal. I read about the concept of amateur radio while at school in the 1970s from an astronomy book. It was on the discovery of radio waves from outer space by Carl G. Jansky, a radio amateur, using his directional 20-meter antenna. This discovery later led to the development of radio telescope and radio astronomy. Just looked up the reference for his original publication now and found it in the Proceedings of the Institute of Radio Engineers, 1932. At the time, I never knew that there were radio amateurs right here in my place as well. It was later when I was at college that an article on ham radio in the local newspaper which caught my attention and introduced me to shortwave listening. At the time, I started tuning into ham radio stations in my home radio at 7 MHz, which I later used as a receiver during my life as a radio amateur. Some of the prominent stations were VU2TG, Guhan from Kottayam, Kerala, India, and VU2JN, Professor J. Raman. There were a few stations on single sideband SSB, which I could not listen at that time because I did not have a beat frequency oscillator BFO, which was needed to introduce a carrier to make SSB stations intelligible on an ordinary radio. My mentor at the time was VU2BY Karan from Kozhikode itself, but I could not master Morse code needed to pass the amateur station operator certificate ASOC examination at that time. After my graduation, I came back to the hobby under the guidance of VU2NYR Narayan and mastered Morse code. I took the ASOC exam held at Kochi and passed grade 1. Another long wait followed for receiving the license and call sign VU2JFP. It was in mid-1980s that I received my call sign. At that time, a QRP designed by VU2VW and Vasant was very popular, and I homebrewed that solid-state QRP and came on air with phone guidance for the first contact from VU2 NYR on CW. Later, AM mode was added and I was regular on 7 MHz checking into CharminarNet at 7080 regularly. As I gained more experience in hobby electronics, I ventured into homebrewing a vacuum tube QRO with 3x807 obtained from an old radio shop in the city. At that time, high-power RF transistors were not available and there was no chance of homebrewing a solid-state QRO. The QRO opened my world to DX. I could contact several countries on CW and few countries on AM. At that time, contacting WLAND USA was considered to be the most tough one for this region on 7 MHz. We had only a short time window in morning and evening when 40-meter band opened to WLAND. I still remember that my first W contact was someone from Maryland, USA on CW. As my radio receiver did not have the 14 MHz amateur band, I could not work on 20 meter. Tried my luck on 80 meters instead. We had plenty of space at home for an 80-meter antenna. I used to throw a string tied to a stone up to a coconut tree and pull up the 80-meter antenna, which was held between two coconut trees, which were there in plenty in the compound. I could work several local stations on 80 meter. I received my advanced grade license after my post-graduation and could get a 2-letter call sign VU2JO with the help of VU2SD and Sahar. Then again, due to tough schedules at work, I went into dormancy on amateur radio to come up in late 1990s with VHF on 2 meters. I had a handheld and a base station and used to work on the repeater located at Nelliyampati, Palakkad. A directional beam was given to me by VO2 FWW Murali, which gave me access to the repeater. Still later, a repeater was installed at the super specialty block, Government Medical College Kozhikode, under the leadership of VU2 JN. I could access this repeater easily as it was quite nearby. Now I have been in dormancy on ham radio for quite some time and wish to revive my hobby after retirement with more time to spare. Yesterday I had a phone contact with VU2JOS Jose, my old ham friend, who has also encouraged me to come back on the air. I hope I'll be able to sooner or later. I have been toying the idea of working amateur radio satellites ever since I got my call sign way back in 1985. So far, I have not been able to do so. When I was active on VHF, once or twice I could listen to amateur radio satellite signals and it sounded like RTTY on HF bands, as I do not have the equipment to decode the signals. I have been inactive on the band for quite some time and is now wishing to come back. My wish to work amateur radio satellites have also come back to me and I have started researching on it. As the first step, I have followed the Twitter handles of International Space Station, amateur radio on the ISS and AMSAT. I remember viewing ISS in sky as a moving tiny star above my home long back when I could time the pass from a news item in the local daily. Today I could contact the amateur radio on the ISS Twitter handle on this aspect and they promptly replied giving me a link to find the past times of amateur radio satellites. It is a link from the AMSAT website. You have to choose the satellite from the big list of which ISS is given as the first one. After that, you have to enter the decimal latitude and longitude of your location, which you can easily find by a Google search. Elevation in meters has to be submitted, the default being 0. Since I am staying only slightly above sea level, I did not have to bother about that. On clicking the predict button, it showed me 3 passes for each day for the 3 days from today. I know that this is a very preliminary step for working amateur radio satellites. Shall follow it up further and keep posting. Most of the amateur radio satellites are deployed in low Earth orbits so that they pass above you more than once a day. You have to track their location using online trackers as discussed previously. They are available for contact in a particular location only for a short period during each pass. Geostationary satellites, on the other hand, have a fixed location and are accessible throughout without having to track them. They are located at a much higher altitude than the usual low Earth orbit satellites. Qatar Oscar 100 was the first geostationary amateur radio transponder which became operational in 2018. It is a joint project between the Qatar Satellite Company, the Qatar Amateur Radio Society, and AMSAT Deutschland, which provided the technical lead. Qatar Oscar 100 is hosted on SHALE-2, a broadcast transponder satellite owned by the Asailsat Qatar Satellite Company. It is now in a geostationary orbit at 25.9 degrees east. Qatar Oscar 100 covers a wide area from Brazil to Thailand. Uplink is in the 2400 MHz and downlink in the 10,450 MHz band. 250 kHz bandwidth linear transponder is intended for conventional analog operations. 8 MHz bandwidth transponder is for experimental digital modulations and DVB amateur television. One can hear the activity on the Qatar Oscar 100 web receiver project at https://shale.batc.org.uk. Today morning, I could listen to the QO100 India morning net between 7 to 7:30 am IST at 10489.690 MHz. Narrow SSP. The audio was quite clear and uninterrupted. VU2 NSL from Kochi, Kerala, India was the net controller. Let me acknowledge the inputs from VU2 NSL, VU3WEW and VU2 OJ. My Twitter contact Andrew KE8FZT tells me that Qatar Oscar 100 cannot be accessed from the US. He has mentioned that there are no other geostationary amateur radio satellites at present. He has also told me that International Space Station does not have the equipment to operate QO100. I was very active on the band and an ardent homebrewer in my younger days as I could not afford a commercial rig. I had started off with a solid-state VU2 VWN QRP, which was very popular at the time. Later, I upgraded to a hybrid QRO with parts of the VU2 VWN QRP and a 3x807 vacuum tube RF amplifier and could work a lot of DX, mostly on CW. Now I am trying to return to hamdom after retirement from morning QTH. Being decades older, I am on the lookout for semi-assembled kits and found some at hfsignals.com. They are giving several options like building from scratch to buying a semi-assembled version which will need some tweaking up after receipt. I also found that at least one VU2 ham is using it as mentioned on QSLNet page of the ham. This one is for SSB and CW, while I never had the chance to homebrew SSB earlier, though I had received a circuit from one of my friends. The rig which I am thinking of is MU-BITX V6, which they mention is for SSB and CW. It seems to be a good QRP with 10 watts PEP on lower HF bands and 5 watts on 28 MHz. It is an Arduino Nano controller based transceiver. They have also provided detailed circuit diagrams and descriptions of how it works. I am preparing this short video in the hope that it will help newcomers who wish to come online but cannot afford a commercial one. Of course, this is not a paid promotional video and I have not used the equipment yet, though I am planning to try it out sooner or later. Another reason for putting this video is to get opinion from numerous homebrewers out there and possibly from those who have actually used it substantially. That input will give me an encouragement to go ahead with the project. Arduino Nano is a small microprocessor which is breadboard friendly. It was released in 2008 and has 30 male I/O headers with DIP30-like configuration. DIP stands for dwell-in pin. Arduino Nano can be programmed using Arduino software. It can be powered through a Type B mini USB cable or from a 9-volt battery. A more recent version is Arduino Nano Every, which was released in 2019. The operating voltage is 5 volts and input voltage can vary from 7 to 12 volts as per the Arduino website. It has a flash memory of 32 KB and a clock speed of 16 MHz. It can communicate with a computer, another Arduino and other microcontrollers. There are 8 analog in pins and 22 digital I/O pins. It weighs only 7 grams and has a size of 18 into 45 millimeters. Arduino Nano controller has been used in amateur radio transceivers in addition to numerous other applications. Arduino Nano is an open source hardware. The current cost as per the manufacturer's website is 21.60 euros as on 16th January 2023. Here is a collection of my videos related to ham.